There is just one reality left. We are here and it is now. You get hold of that and hang on to it, or you might as well be dead.
Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone. Tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we will have live viewer call-ins via Skype pretty much any time that you want. We'll have the weekly Lancaster County virus statistics where I live. We will talk about, again, how the Democrats are out for blood unabated. We will have a review, oh God, of Batwoman Season 2, Episode 3, Batgirl Magic. We will have a non-spoiler discussion of WandaVision, what's going on there. We will have a non-spoiler discussion of The Expanse and what's going on there. And pretty much anything else that you want to talk about or get my take on. Now, this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you're certainly free to talk with me about anything that you like in chat. You can talk to me about anything, any question, political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without my videos and channel being deranked any more than it already is. Thank you very much, YouTube. Or you can ask me things about science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I'm happy to answer each question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as I can with the understanding that I don't really want my stream to go any longer than 3 hours, because after that my back starts to fall apart because I got lower back arthritis because I'm old. If you'd like to call into the show, I'm doing that via Skype, and since I don't really want to give out all of my Skype information in public, I would like to handle it this way. If you're interested in talking with me directly, send me an email at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information. I'll Skype you right back. You can then talk to me about anything that you want. You can tell me I'm a jerk, you can agree, you can disagree, anything that you happen to like to talk about. So again, if you're interested in talking with me directly, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information. I'll Skype you back. That email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. So tonight we will be answering the question, as always, that nobody asked. What are the current Lancaster County virus statistics where I live in Lincoln, Nebraska? Well, the source, as always for this, is the City of Lincoln / Lancaster County Health Department. It's a very cool website. I suggest you go. It's linked to in my description box below. Always useful, however, to take a look at totals rather than, weekly ongoing things, because the totals will tell you a heck of a lot more what the situation actually is. So our statistics this week. Well, the total Lancaster County population remains roughly constant at about 323,862. Hey, Dalton Brazier. Hi, nice to see you here tonight. Glad to have you. The number of tests is at 165,288, which is up. I'm sorry, it slid under my makeshift thing here. Up 3,128 tests from last week. Now, this isn't representative of a percentage of our population, because any given test can result in more tests if it turns out to be positive or maybe indeterminate. They'll do others to make sure that they find out they don't have a false positive or something like that. So it's not really indicative of much of anything, frankly. The total Lancaster County number of positive tests is now up to 26,958, which is up 576 from last week. Total Lancaster County deaths is now all the way up to 202. We have burst to the 200 level, which, however, is only up 9 from last week. This represents a continuation of our very modest weekly increases, and frankly, the rate of increase is going down, so that's a good thing. Drop of Truth, nice to see you from Oz. Hey, interesting thing about that. I'll talk about it later, of course, but I use Scanner Radio Pro as my application to keep abreast of first responders. For the first time, your country went off. That doesn't usually happen because I have foreign countries set to a higher threshold to go off. But yours went off because you've apparently had some wildfires down there. Shouldn't smile about that, but I was interested in the fact that it actually went off, when it almost never does. Our number of vaccine doses is at roughly 31,100, which is up 2,000 from last week. Given our other stats and the rates of increase, the vaccine appears to have had not even the slightest bit of effect. If anything, it may have made things worse. As the first week that we saw it administered, we had 53 death spike. I don't know for sure what that means, because since then it's been having no effect that I can tell. Drop 2 says the current moronic premier of Western Australia, Mark McGowan, shut down the whole state because of one of these virus infections. Well, thank God we haven't got anybody too crazy like that around here, although our local mayor is behaving as if Lincoln, Nebraska is her own little personal fiefdom, and the governor is continuing to behave as the entire state is his own personal fiefdom, and doing things that don't make any sense and that won't actually help. But I don't think we see anybody go nuts over one infection. Deaths, and these where we get into more interesting statistics, as a percentage of total tests is all the way up to 0.122%, which is up 0.004% from last week. Again, aside from the spike initially seen when the vaccine began to be administered, this is statistically identical for weeks now. No real change here whatsoever. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases has sadly climbed all the way to 0.749%. Never happy to see that above where it was during last summer, which is about 0.3% for months. But it is all the way up to 0.749%, which is up all of 0.017% from last week. Aside from that spike, again, that we saw when the vaccine began to be first administered, this is really statistical identical for several weeks now, meaning that there has been no change to speak of. Deaths as a percentage of our total population is up to 0.0623%, which is up 0.0023% from last week. Statistically, this is identical since the entire pandemic started. There has been no real change statistically on that. It is still statistically insignificant when you compare the number of people who die from misadventure or just plain being sick, heart attacks, automobile accidents, doing something stupid, drunk driving, things like that. More people die of that every year than they have from this virus to date. Drop 2 says, yes, the northern suburbs of Perth, WA, are on fire again. Sorry to hear that. Swan Valley, Mundaring, etc. It happens every 3 years or so. Yeah, I was just interested, like I say, that it went off for the first time. I'd never seen that happen. Let's see. Now that Trump is gone, most governors are starting to ease up on the tyranny. Well, I haven't seen any real change in what our governor is doing. He's responding to the usual press nonsense, which is out and out lies, but it's done a good job of terrifying people. So he feels like he has to do something, because if he doesn't, the press will get all over him. Drop 2 says it's not under control and is suspected to be arson initiated. Oh, great. Lots of pyromaniacs in Australia. Many are volunteer firefighters. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Hardly ever prosecuted. Go figure. Well, at least that's something I don't think we have a problem with here. People don't usually go and do that. Want to reiterate something that I heard from healthcare professionals now. It's been, let's see, my doctor's appointment for my regular diabetes checkup, my going to a dentist and speaking with them and hearing what they have to say from other nurses, and now a second time going to the dentist and hearing a totally different story, but they're all exactly the same. Our local press, being as totally unreliable as press everywhere, is reporting that our hospitals are overflowing and strained. But every single one of our hospitals, according to the health professionals I talk to, they have virus wards that are 100% empty. Multiple hospitals. I think we got we have this huge complex. There's at least 4 that I can mention. The nurses and healthcare professionals that go to those hospitals, which they all do at some point or another, they go and visit patients in the hospital, all reporting the same thing. They're all empty. 100% empty. Drop It True says, Super Cruise 63 says, hello all. Hey, nice to see you. Always love my audience. You guys are the smartest guys in the world because you're watching me. So as always, just have to tell you and reiterate that nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. As always, never rely on the press for any kind of information. Instead, rely on police and first responder frequencies. I always suggest broadcastify.com, linked to below. And I, of course, myself use the Scanner Radio mobile app, which is also linked to below. Or use citizen journalists who are streaming from a breaking event, preferably the ones who just point their cameras and shut up, thus allowing you to come to conclusions about what you're seeing rather than having you have a talking head telling you about it. The talking heads 99% of the time during a breaking story are just sitting there free associating. I've occasionally covered breaking stories, and when I do it, I'm free associating. If I'm just sitting there talking, I'm totally free associating. Unless I'm sitting there on the ground, I don't know any more than you do, and neither do they. They just free associate. They just blabber something because they have to be blabbering. The other thing about that is, with nothing in the press that you see being real, nothing always is, I must mention in case people are watching this on demand, or I have some new viewers, I have a very, very old, 41-year-old now, as of this last month, 41-year-old hobby of debunking the press. These days, if you give me any press story from any source whatsoever, and it doesn't matter what it is, in about 30 minutes, I can prove one of three things: that either the event being reported never happened, that it didn't happen as reported, or that when you strip away a slick interface, a cute-looking thing on the newspaper, things like opinions, emotionally loaded language, and filler, you find that you really only have a couple of paragraphs at best of real facts. So I always do also have a open challenge to my viewers. If you want to see me do this and see what my methods look like, just hand me, email me, anything, send me something on Twitter or any of the other millions of things that I'm on for my social media. Any kind of print story that you want, and I will do it. I will debunk it cold. I will not read it in advance. I'll just put it up here, which is why it should be print so that it can put up next to me. And I will totally debunk it for you right before your very eyes. Drop 2 says, just another form of tyranny, Dalton Brazier, much like Orwell's 1984. Yeah, boy, it turned out he was prophetic, wasn't it? And it turns out that they've been using this virus as an excuse for him to be prophetic. So, the Democrats continue to be out for blood. It's, as I mentioned last week, it's very, very concerning to me as a libertarian because they have named people who are libertarians as part of an unholy alliance with other maybe normal or unsavory persons out to do God knows what. And they have legislation pending in Congress that would basically set up, domestic surveillance, domestic terrorism, things like that. And when you get named, as I have been, kind of makes you think that maybe you now have a target painted on your back. Always want to show what Tulsi Gabbard has said about this, because she seems to be the only person who has ever been in government that has the right take on it.
The mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th to try to stop Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities were behaving like domestic enemies of our country. But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies, and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol. Now, John Brennan said,
So I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President Biden, I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
Tulsi Gabbard, I love you. If you're not happily married, please contact me. We're both dyeing our hair. In my case, my beard. In your case, everything but that one streak that you've got going through there. But if Tulsi Gabbard were to run for president in 2024, I would change for the first time in 30 years, at least, I don't remember, my party affiliation to Democrat just so I could vote for her in the primaries. Probably change it after that and vote for her for president. But clearly she's the only human being that has ever been serving in the Congress who has the slightest notion that what we're building here is frankly horrible. This is the president that you could have had if the Democratic Party hadn't first excluded her in every way possible and then basically, jiggled things around so that Joe Biden got the nomination. Because none of the Democrats that I know actually wanted Joe Biden. The Democrats that I know tended to want Bernie Sanders, frankly, which, wouldn't be a great president, but that's who they wanted. I knew people who were voting in, because I used to live in Iowa, I have friends there. I knew people who were voting in the caucuses, and they all wanted Bernie. I'm dead certain that the reason that the Democratic side of the Iowa caucuses went completely to hell this time was because solely for one reason, it was engineered so that Bernie Sanders wouldn't get the publicity bump that you always get from the caucuses. It's the only thing that ever matters in Iowa is those caucuses, and it's entirely because it becomes a media frenzy and a media circus. It gets completely insane, and the Democrats there were left pissed off. Most of the rest of the state there was left pissed off because nothing that stupid has ever happened in Iowa before. For 150 years, I don't remember when they became a state, Iowa has been somehow able to run a caucus without it going completely to hell. This time around, the Democrats absolutely engineered it so that media bump that whoever wins that gets didn't go to Bernie Sanders. As I say, most of the Democrats I know wanted to vote for him. I think the Democrats were just a-holes, the way they always are. Drop of Truth is saying, Eric Blair, George Orwell was a Fabian socialist like Julian and Aldous Huxley. It's a big club, and we ain't in it, as George Carlin said. Absolutely. Democrat or Republican, Drop of Truth says, just different names for the same puppets. Well, there's a reason that I have been a libertarian for a long, long time. I'll go ahead and say it. It's something that it's an expression that a good old friend of mine, late friend of mine, came up with one time, and it's not entirely accurate. But he expressed what libertarians tend to think in a certain way by saying, Republicans, Democrats, baby rapers, what's the difference? You can attribute that to the late, great Ken Holder. And in point of fact, we don't really think they're baby rapers. It's more a question of they seem to generally be two sides of the same coin. There's no real argument in Congress, which is the traditional American argument, about whether or not government should be involved in something. That is the traditional American argument. Now it's simply a question of where do we carve up all of the power. Nobody's saying we need to have smaller government. The last person who did that, I think, was Reagan, and he grew it. But we're no longer having that traditional American conversation about whether government should be involved in something. It's just a question of what they should be involved in. And depending on which party happens to be in power, government will be involved in some part of your life that it shouldn't be and generally tends to be totally unconstitutional. Supercruise 63 says, here in the People's Republic of California, I saw more Bernie stickers than any other until the DNC nominated Biden. Believe me, it was a lot. Oh, I believe that. Yeah, we saw the same things here. All the Democrats I know wanted Bernie. I don't know how the hell they got Biden exactly. I don't get that at all. Don't forget the congressman from Kentucky, Thomas Massey. Don't know that much about him, to be perfectly honest. You drive 25 miles to work each way. Yeah, just driving around the city. Driving around Des Moines, where I, still went to from time to time. Yeah. It's Bernie signs until, as you say, Biden got the nomination, and then it all flipped because for them, they've exited reality 4 years ago, and so anything that's not Trump meant, okay, well, we'll take that, and unfortunately, that's what we got. Excuse me. Oh, Massey's a libertarian? Okay, I see. I don't really keep much track of people in the Libertarian Party. As I mentioned last week, when, Brennan talks about libertarians being part of some unholy alliance, you can't get libertarians to be involved in anything collectively. It's just impossible. I once ran for office in South Dakota on the Libertarian ticket, discovered that it was like going down a rabbit hole to some extent, and B, aside from local and sometimes state offices, they can't get anybody elected to anything for a number of reasons. One of them has to do with ballot access laws. Ballot access laws in all states are set up so that Democrats and Republicans are automatically on them, but any other third party has to work their asses off just to get on them. And the reason that they wanted me running a totally paper campaign for an office I had no interest in whatsoever was so that they had a better chance of getting on the ballot the next time. And the reason it turns into a rabbit hole is there aren't that many libertarians around. So when you get people who are committed enough to actually go out and stomp around and hit the doors and get the signatures on all of the paperwork that you need in order to get on the ballot, and then have it kicked out by the state's attorney general, which always happens, and then have to go out and do it all over again and turn it back in, and then finally get them certified so you can be on the ballot. It kills all of your energy, and anybody who's really, wanting to do that level of work gets tapped for it forever. I just, after a while, I was like, there's no way I can do this level of activism for just nothing. So I don't really necessarily, I'm registered as a libertarian, but as far as the Libertarian Party goes, I don't really hold out much hope for these guys. Drop a 2 says, Biden's 17-plus executive orders have bypassed Congress and erased everything beneficial from Trump's presidency. Yes, there's a video showing Biden saying, "What am I signing?" That's just perfect. Yeah, I've seen it on an open mic where he says, "What am I? I don't even know what I'm signing." The whole point of those various things is to reverse everything Trump did as much as possible. It is bypassing the legislative branch. It's unconstitutional. I have often thought that if I was somehow, by some bizarre circumstance, elected president as a libertarian, about the first thing I would do would be just sign 50 executive orders every single day that intentionally bypassed Congress so that it would force them to do something to take back their power. Not going to see that because, of course, the stuff he's signing is all anti-Trump because Orange Man bad. And so the Democrats are going to let that slide regardless. They're just going to do whatever he wants. But again, if it was me, just to force them to stop me, I would be signing 50, 100 of them every day. Stuff that would, just be horribly, horribly dangerous and bad over and over and over again just to get them to stop me. Drop 2 says, when your country is undergoing a pandemic, shouldn't immigration be restricted? Yeah. Obviously, common sense is not a prerequisite of the Biden administration. Yes, I have friends that are so generally prone to see things in racist terms that they just don't get the concept of infection vectors. That is, how is it that a virus or something like that could potentially spread? Well, one of the ways it could spread, and this isn't just the southern border, this is any border, is the fact that you have international trade, immigrants coming in, etc., who are not tested for anything on entry. On port of entry, they are not tested for anything. Just look back less than 100 years ago. Ellis Island. That was where people came in, and if they tested and found out that you had some, basically communicable, disease or something like that, they would sit and quarantine you. That ought to be happening. To reduce that infection vector. That should have happened a long time ago. It happened with the Chinese, but yeah, I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with the skin color of the people who are at the southern border. It has to do with infection vectors. I'm not saying that they're all infected. What I'm saying is that they're not tested for anything. Nobody coming into this country is tested for anything. That ought to change. And immigration in general should be either restricted or changed so that people are actually tested at port of entry. Let's see. Super Cruise 63 says, drop of truth. They don't care about the people. They only care about power. Yes. Everyone in government, and I've now seen this in action with my local mayor, who's mayor of 322,000-ish people. She's turned into basically, lord of her local fiefdom here. There's always, people are pissed off about it. I find that a good thing. But there's always talk about trying to get her out or recall her. I think they're just going to have to wait for the next election. They're all power-mad sociopathic narcissists from your local mayor up, and they don't care about anything except that power. They spend all of their time now, particularly at the federal level, 99.99999, say this a million times, 999.9999999% of what they do is flatly unconstitutional by any sane reading of the document, and are basically there solely so that they can acquire and maintain as much personal power as they possibly can for as long as they can. Drop of Truth says, sadly, that's true, Super Cruise 63. It's a hallmark of every totalitarian dictatorship. Yes, and as Tulsi Gabbard noted, we are headed in that direction. Yeah, could have had Tulsi, somebody who could conceivably, in fact, have unified the country to some extent by not being out of contact, because I don't think she has been, not being out of contact with reality for 4 years, and therefore capable of seeing that even if you don't like Trump, he's not literal Hitler. He's not the Antichrist. He's not actually any kind of racist, sexist, homophobe, etc. He's a rich guy who no doubt, got it on with women outside of his marriage because that's what rich guys can get away with doing. Bill Burr has mentioned that there is an epidemic of gold-digging whores in this country, and that's just the case. I mean, a perfect example of this is Tony Stark, and the very first Iron Man movie, where that reporter from Vanity Fair, he sleeps with her, she gets up the next morning, she thinks this is her into this rich guy thing. But Pepper Potts shows up. She's a little snarky to Pepper, and Pepper just kind of kicks her out of the house, saying, yes, sometimes I do everything and anything Mr. Stark requires, including occasionally taking out the trash. Will that be all? I mean, that's what rich men do. It's not moral, it's not nice, but, women, when they're throwing themselves at you, as always happens, you will get that. I'm sure that if I won the lottery, there would be a bevy of women lining up for my attention to get a little piece of that lottery money. Look at me. Is anybody going to line up for me? Let's see. Supercruise 63 says, if our country is so bad, then why do so many people want to come here? Well, if the Democrats have their way, they won't want to come here anymore, because when you have people like me named as part of an unholy alliance, libertarians who can't do anything. Under the best of circumstances, politically they can't do anything. And they can't do anything outside of political circumstances, I mentioned last week. Libertarians all have their own personal idea of how to make the world safe and wonderful and all that, and lead to what they, we jokingly call it libertopia because we don't actually believe in a utopia. But what would you do to, bring it back to some level of individual liberty? And they all think they've got the perfect plan, and it's their own personal perfect plan. And if you don't want to go along with their own personal perfect plan, they aren't going to go along with you. They can't agree on they can agree on general principles, but they can't do anything. Getting them to do collective action is impossible. I don't know where Brennan gets that from, other than, I guess, San Francisco, guess what? They just changed I've forgotten who it was. I read it a couple of days ago. It was an art school or art department of one of the local colleges that they renamed because they have decided that acronyms are racist or white supremacist. Acronyms, like the thousands of acronyms that exist in IT, I guess. Because, there isn't anything that we actually spell out. We don't say domain name system, we say DNS. We don't say database management system, we say DBMS. All kinds of stuff like that. We don't say, I don't even remember what TCP and IP stand for, but they're acronyms. We don't say anything but acronyms, but no, they're white supremacists. They also named people who like to expound individuality and individual personal freedom as white supremacists and Nazis and stuff. That would include me, by the way, you idiots. Let's see. Supercruise63 said, I understand why Bill Clinton did it. Oh, God, I never thought that I would pine for the days of the Clinton administration. God, I thought that was bad at the time. It turns out that was nothing. God, if we could have a Bill Clinton back, I'd be almost happy at this point. Let him ruin the lives and reputations of the women he screwed or, things like that, because that was better. I never thought I would ever hear myself say that. Dropper 2 says, Trump and every other U.S. president, bar one, is an ancestor of England's John I. I didn't know that. The U.S. amusingly assumes that they are not under a monarchy or plutocracy. Well, maybe I'm naive, but I think that in general it's been a declining republic for some time. Always like to point out the historical side of this. The Constitution basically lasted about 18 months in reality. That was when the Whiskey Rebellion started, and it was put down. And at that point, constitutional principles kind of went out the window. My favorite statesman of all time, Thomas Jefferson, when he did the Louisiana Purchase, and I totally understand why he did it. I probably would have done it myself. When you can buy, an enormous tract of land for a song from the French, as he did, you want to do that. But there is no constitutional basis for adding territory to the United States. He tried to get a constitutional amendment passed so we could do it, but, they couldn't do it. And he said, well, hell, this is an enormous amount of land. But he said himself that it strained the Constitution to the breaking point. Then you had Abraham Lincoln, who... obviously, the things that happened in terms of freeing slaves and all of that was a very good thing. I never want to say that what he did was bad. I know people who want to, make that stupid argument. But freeing the slaves, good thing to do. But by the same token, he took what had been a whole bunch of separate individual nations that were essentially banded together for a couple of three common causes and turned it into a single centralized nation centralized in Washington, D.C. And it's only gotten worse since then. FDR, Lincoln pretty much put the Constitution into a coffin. FDR basically pounded the final nails in its coffin and put it in the grave, and every politician since then has been pissing on it. It was once an actual constitutional republic, but it has not been one for a long time. Drop 2 says, socialism equals a slow death. Death by 1,000 cuts taxes. Not even that anymore. If you listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Red Cortez, as I always call her on the show. Oh, man, has she been lying up a storm. I guess there's a Twitter hashtag going around now that says Alexandria Ocasio Smollett, because she's been lying about what went on and that Capitol invasion. She's been saying how she was terrified, and she gave out 2 different locations that she'd been was sent to. The most recent one she gave out details was about her own office, which was nowhere near anywhere that the protests or even going into the Capitol building were going on. And she, talked about, she went into the bathroom and heard people pounding on the door, "Where are you? Get her," and stuff like that. And it turned out it was a cop, looking to come and protect her. But even that wasn't good enough for her. She had to go on and talk about how she still felt scared because it was a cop, because he looked at her wrong. His job is to go there and make sure that she's safe, and he looked at her wrong in a way that she interpreted as some kind of hostility. Maybe it's just a cop who's in the middle of being stressed about something that you've never seen before in the Capitol. He's supposed to go and get these congressmen, make sure that they're safe. What if he was just stressed, you moron? In any case, she was never in any danger. All of the stuff she's been yammering on about, how she felt like her life was in danger, and all this crap was just total nonsense. Alexandria Ocasio-Smollett, yes. Let's see. Okay, as socialism, however, socialism is less a death by 1,000 cuts anymore. The current socialism that we see in the United States is almost indistinguishable from communism, even when they talk about democratic socialism. Socialism you vote for, it doesn't work like that. Socialism is always a precursor to communism, and we're seeing it now right here in the United States. The problem is, as always, Drop2 saying, send AOC back to Venezuela. Not necessarily back, but I always say to anybody who's a socialist, which is just about anybody, who is educated in the last 30 or so years, go to a socialist country and see what it's actually like. Because socialists that escape things like Venezuela are frightened that we're going to do it here. And they saw what happened in their own nation. Went from being extremely rich, oil-producing country, to a third world nation. And that's what you get with socialism. It's, at this point, almost indistinguishable from communism. And again, the reason that we had this is because we have had a long-term problem with education being dumbed down over the course of more than a century now. And the last 30 or so years, it has turned into nothing but communist and socialist indoctrination. So our children were brought up believing that communism and socialism are good, when they're in fact totally destructive. Communism and socialism always fail, killing millions of people in the process. But unfortunately, my generation, which had a chance to put an end to this by reforming education in a major way, did not. Our children and the children that came after that are being indoctrinated, and that is that. That is why we have the problem now. If millennials, post-millennials had not been indoctrinated, hell, even my generation had some of this indoctrination. If we did not, we wouldn't be in the place that we are right now. Drop2 says, placing the word democratic in front of any other political ideology does not make it so. Democratic socialism is an oxymoron. Well, there's a reason that this country was founded as a republic rather than a democracy. The people who founded the country had looked to history and seen that mob rule, which is what democracy is, where everybody has a vote for everything, ultimately leads to disaster. A republic, on the other hand, seems to last a little longer, though in their case, it was about 250 or so years, 225, something like that, before it all started to kind of come crashing down. But, we're not supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic. Anybody that talks about a democracy in the U.S. being a democracy, which is damn near all politicians, don't understand or don't care or are pandering to people who don't understand the difference. And I don't know which. But since they're power-mad, sociopathic narcissists, you can pretty well assume that they're just vying for more power, and they see that as a way to do it, by pandering to whomever wants democracy. But, the insanity that we're seeing, the San Francisco school is only just kind of indicative. I mean, we had the House banning pronouns, banning references to things like wives, mothers, fathers. It's insanity, total insanity. Like, I'm sorry, I have a sister, I have a mother, I had a father, I have nieces and nephews, I have grandnieces and nephews. Sorry, guys, those words are meaningful. Just because you want to add 5 million genders doesn't help anything. Super Crew 63 says we are supposed to be a representative republic and not a democracy. Yes, exactly. That is what it's supposed to be. As a libertarian, I'm of the stripe of libertarian that's called an anarcho-capitalist. Unless you want me to, I will not sit and explain what that means and how that differs from other libertarian philosophies. But put it this way, I am so extreme that I would like to see the government involved in even less than the Constitution says. However, I always tell people, I would settle for a restoration of the constitutional republic. Sadly, that's not going to happen, again, because we have these multiple generations of individuals who have been taught that communism is socialism is a good thing, and to overlook the fact that literally everything that they touch, every single thing that you touch in modern society was produced by the free market. Every single thing. There is not a single thing that I can look at here on my desk anywhere around that was not produced by the free market. They whine about it, but guys, you wouldn't have this if it wasn't for the free market. You would not have in your pocket a device capable of accessing the sum total of knowledge of human and wisdom if it wasn't for that. If you had government coming out with it, they'd have never come out with it. They never would have. It would have been impossible. So that's my little bit of ranting for about the first 45 minutes of this. I want to get on to something, oh God, a little bit more light, I guess. It's kind of light. God. And that would be Batwoman Season 2, Episode 3, Batgirl Magic. Oh God. Well, I'll tell you as always, unlike most reviewers, I do not sit down and rehash the plot, just pausing to say what I thought was dumb or didn't like, or did. In this case, it's dumb. I instead do a bit more depth than that usually, although this time it's just going to be all the stupid. We'll take it as read that if you've come to this video looking for any kind of review, you've already watched Batwoman Season 2, Episode 3, or you just don't care if it's spoiled. I'll also be talking about WandaVision and The Expanse a little later, but those won't be spoilery. But for safety's sake, just for those who don't want Batwoman spoiled, we should probably issue ourselves a...
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a secret master of fandom. That means that the fandom is strong with me. And that's neither a boast nor a brag. It's just where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. And in my case, done a fair amount of research on fandom itself from its inception. The problem with us secret masters of fandom is that we're cursed. We cannot see anything that's new without seeing the whole century that came before. We discover that there isn't very much that's original, and it often interferes with our ability to enjoy things. But one thing I don't do is outrage reviews. There are a lot of reviewers who are simply actors portraying outrage because outrage sells. They hate everything as a knee-jerk reflex because they want their viewers want to see things they hate. It causes a weird feedback loop between fans and popular reviewers where ultimately nobody likes anything. But I don't do that. If I like something, I'll tell you why in as much detail as I can. If I dislike it, I'll say why, but I don't do outrage. Unlike other reviewers, I am the adult in this room. Let's see. Raining where you live. Drop of truth. This is the wettest summer you can recall, not in a tropical zone. Where I'm at, they're very worried. We got a ton of snow lately, but they're very worried that because we had an otherwise mild winter, that it may not be enough precipitation, and it may be problematic for the agricultural industry. So we'll see what happens. Batwoman was another decent episode. Not great, but decent. There were parts that was okay, but I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I found this one incredibly stupid. Troubadour says there's a rumor that Batwoman has been greenlit for a third season. Yes, if you look on IMDb, I did today when I was glancing to see what the title of this thing was. Oh, God, yes, it's showing a third season. You guess when money is meaningless, debt and bankruptcy is inevitable. This one is solely, it's less woke this season than it was the last, and that's because you didn't have Ruby Rose jumping into bed with every single woman that she happened to run across. It's a little less woke in that regard. You certainly have characters that are ticking the woke boxes, but that's not what's jumping out at me in terms of this season so far. Give them a little time. They often find a way to hang themselves, but that's not jumping out at me so far. But in terms of it being meaningless, the money meaningless, and bankruptcy inevitable, I just think that they're keeping this one on for the same reason that Kathleen Kennedy stays on at Lucasfilm. If you fire her, if you cancel this show, then you're going to see a ton of backlash from the woke. Firing Kathleen Kennedy is just about impossible because they're going to say, "Oh, you did it because she was a woman, not because she fouled up $1 billion property, but because she's a woman." Same thing with this. You're going to say, "Oh, you did it because the showrunner is a lesbian," or "You did it because it's got too much representation in it." Not that all the scripts tend to suck and be stupid, but because of all that stuff. I think that's the main reason the show is on. Lots of other shows would have been canceled after the first season because of that. Superguru63 says the funny thing is that ratings went from 2.0 to 3.9. I think you got here. Oh no, we disagree. The world is going to end. Well, I don't think so. We can have a friendly disagreement. I'm just not going to rant about it much. So, here's what I think of this show. Last week, it for the first time hit a 5, which on my very low expectation rating means it's passable. This time we had a lot more stupid. I started writing it down. I was thinking I was going to do an actual Batwoman review come about Monday or Tuesday. But I got to writing down all the stupid and I just gave up. There's so much of it. Supercruise63 says, you hear Dune is going to be under the Star Wars franchise. Is that true? Oh, God, no. No. It couldn't possibly be. Dune is a totally separate universe. Very complex universe. I don't know how you actually put that to film. There's so much complexity in there. You could do like the first book. I think they did it fairly well on the Sci-Fi Channel when they did their adaptation. I think that was pretty good. They adapted the first 2 books. But there's so much backstory in there. It's like Lord of the Rings. If outside of the movies that you've probably seen, if you look at the entirety of the works that occur in Middle-earth, there is enormous, well-fleshed out universe. And you couldn't connect that to Star Wars in any case. It would be impossible. Yes, I say thank God all the time myself. I live in a Christian society, despite the fact that I'm an atheist. I certainly pick up all of the standard, sayings. It doesn't hold the same, spiritual level for me. It's just that, okay, everybody says that, and you pick it up after 51 years. Anyway, Batwoman. Let me get out, because I can tell you some of the stuff that I wrote down. Let me just show you the first one, right? Because this has been something that's been a problem right from the beginning of the show. They keep acting, and they had this in this episode. They keep acting as though you're going to see Kate Kane again. Well, you're not. The actress who played her left. Now, if you wanted to play it like it's some kind of why did she leave and all that, and it's a mystery like Bruce Wayne taking off, maybe you could do that. But, with maybe leave the door open for her to come back. But they didn't do that. They did it in a way that she shouldn't be able to come back whatsoever. Dropper 2 says you like the David Lynch film about Dune. Yes. It was very much an abridged version, but you liked it. Yeah, it's really hard to do that. Dune is so complex with so much backstory and stuff. If you read the novels, it's just really, really thick. It would be like, if Star Trek was nothing but novels and stuff, and you took one piece of that out and decided you were going to make something about it. All of this backstory and lore you would not be able to put to film. It would just be possible in 2 hours. Frank Herbert books, Drop 2 says, are a parallel with the Islamic Mahdi ideology. Yes, I know, particularly when you get into some of the, I've forgotten, like God Emperor of Dune. Clearly, yeah, absolutely. But the biggest thing about this, when they tease Kate Kane coming back, or maybe she's still alive, is their complete misunderstanding of airplanes. Okay, it is established in that first episode of the season that Luke has been able to track this airplane that she's in as it's coming down out of the sky, accelerating well past 420 knots. Well, 420 knots is about 500 miles an hour. Let me show you what happens when you take a jet aircraft like that one and slam it into concrete at 500 miles an hour. Now, admittedly, this was ground and not concrete. But when you're traveling at 500 miles an hour, it just doesn't matter very much. This is what happens. This is, I believe, an F-14 fighter jet. That they have strapped to a track. In fact, they had to strap it down so that it didn't actually take off because they accelerated the thing to 500 miles an hour. What this video is showing here actually is there's a concrete block at that side. It's the same kind of concrete that goes around certain nuclear power plants. And so they were saying, okay, what if some terrorist decided to slam into it at 500 miles an hour? So here we go. It's gone. Just gone. If you watch it in slow-mo, you're going to see it. At that speed, it just disintegrates. Even seeing the way that we saw, the aircraft coming down, I see nothing left. Nothing at all left. It totally disintegrated. Here's another shot where you can see it even more. Bam! It didn't even hurt the concrete block. Some scratches on it. Here's another one in slow-mo. You can see it. Just totally disintegrated. The airplane was coming down out of the sky at 500 miles an hour. Okay, so you hit the ground. It's not quite as hard as concrete, although at 500 miles an hour, it damn near ought to be. Coming in at 500 miles an hour. And the way that we saw that thing crashing, it was turned on its side, and it was going down, but still 500 miles an hour down. You might wind up, if you hit the ground at an angle, you might wind up with a debris field. But mostly it's going to look like this. 500 miles an hour, slamming into the ground. It's just going to disintegrate. So whenever they tease her coming back and even finding the bat suit and all of that was just utterly ridiculous, just totally ridiculous. And when they tease her coming back, I'm just like, you guys don't know the first thing about science. And by the way, I found this on YouTube with a very simple search. I wasn't happy at the resolution that I got it in. I would have liked to have a 1080p one, but this is a test from a number of years ago. But that's the damage to the concrete block. It's a bit of a shadow. The whole thing just completely fell apart. F-14 Phantom. Okay, Super Cruise 63, thank you. I'll go back up here a little bit. Super Cruise 63 says, do you think if the ratings stay high like they are with The Expanse, maybe season 7? I know we're going on to season 6. I certainly hope it's not going to be the last. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Crypto 1701. Hey, nice to see you here. New as far as I know. Great to have new viewer. Planes are aluminum cans. Yeah. I mean, when those jet aircraft are coming down at 500 miles an hour, nobody gets to survive it, and teasing that she's going to come back, or this new villain saying that, oh, well, I've got her, her necklace. Like you couldn't buy those somewhere else? And I've got her, where she is. She's like hidden on this island. And you're just like, no, she was just killed. And that's another thing, too. It goes back to the first episode. But the notion that the bat suit can somehow survive that kind of crash, if she'd only been in it, would have been fine. Except, of course, for this place around her mouth. It's just dumb. Dumb. Crypto 1701, a Tomcat's not going to do any better. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the aircraft is. You hit the ground at 500 miles, you are dead. Everybody's dead. The thing is disintegrating. If you hit an angle, maybe you'll leave a debris field, but you ain't going to find nothing but maybe a little DNA. That's all there is to it. Drop Truth says it's a reinforced concrete block of geopolymer concrete, like a Roman candle. Now we're getting into my subject of expertise. Okay, and Crypto 1701, big bada boom. Exactly. Well, you could probably tell me better than Drop Truth because I know you've done engineering and stuff. But, correct me if I'm wrong, but even a two engine, which what it was, like a twin engine small passenger jet, comes down out of the sky at 500 miles an hour. Nobody gets to live through that. It's just dumb. Drop 2 says the Hoover Dam was not made with Portland cement. Oh, I know it's very, very strong. I get that. It's extra strong. As I say, that test was showing what would happen. It was like, oh no, what if somebody decided to fly a plane into a nuclear power plant? And they were saying, no, it isn't going to matter. Yep, Crypto 1701, the artistic license has gone too far. Let me pull up. I didn't bother because, as I say, I got to the point where I was just listing out so much stupid that it was in this episode. But let me pull out what I had written down. It was prepped for another show that I didn't do. I probably should have, but it's only partial. It's only partial. My notes on this were as follows. I was just going through the beginning of it. Okay. Cringe moments. Right from the top. Right from the top. I'll mention something that was good. All right. Here's some good things. I always like to mention good things about the episode. Lavicia Leslie certainly continues to be a better Batwoman than Ruby Rose was. She's a much better actress. She, can do something besides just smirk. Rachel Scarston continues to subdue her performance a little more. I think that's good. She was way over the top in season 1. Luke, at the beginning of the episode, really just couldn't give a crap about Ryan. I thought that's good. They should continue this indefinitely, but unfortunately, I think after this episode, they won't. Ryan does continue to occasionally stumble, not be so damn perfect all the time. Sometimes I think that maybe they were watching YouTube reviewers and said, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Because they've done some things that correct, what were obvious flaws. So, having her stumble, having her not know how to do the suit, I hope that it's not just that things like, the boots don't fit her and stuff like that. I hope that she continues to stumble indefinitely. Yes, there is, as you say, Super Cruiser 3, a backstory about Alice's fighting skills. Again, I think they were watching maybe YouTube reviewers when they're all going, how is this woman fighting Batwoman when she's got all this training and stuff? So, yeah, giving her that wasn't a bad idea. I think it was a retcon, however. We never saw that coming. It was never hinted at. I think they just maybe said, yeah, that's dumb. Maybe we should fix that. Dropper 2 says it's like smashing a tin can with petrol in it near live wires. Expect an explosion. Yeah, a big one. A big one. Nobody walks away from that. I was thinking at the time, the best thing that they could probably do with the show, and should have seen it again with Kate last year, was that the smart thing to do, frankly, if you had a good showrunner who didn't mind showing these characters who are ticking woke boxes as something other than 100% practically perfect in every way, was you would do an ongoing arc throughout the entire season of Ryan kind of stumbling with something specific that she just couldn't do no matter how hard she tries. Then in the season finale, you have some situation that comes up that this thing that she can't do would be the only thing that would be necessary to save somebody's life. So after a season of building up to it, then Ryan could triumphantly save the day. Character development, baby. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that now that she's got things worked out with the suit, it's going to be practically perfect in every way. Crypto 1701 says a remake of a remake of a remake. Yes, as Brody and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back mentioned, we're reaching the point break of remakes and reboots, and it's not going to be the Patrick Swayze one. Okay, stupid things that happened in this episode. And again, this is not a complete one, because as I was going through this, it was so many things. I said, screw this. I can't do this as just a full review. I just can't. I'm going to have to talk about it on the stream. Okay, first off, hiring a hitman to murder your adulterous husband. Okay, now I recognize that this is something of a wish fulfillment among women, but it is, in reality, ridiculously stupid. The fact is that the law is entirely on a woman's side. If you have a couple that divorces for any reason, family law means that the woman will take the children, will take the assets, will take the possessions, and leave a man permanently destitute. I won't talk about my own personal situation. There is a reason that MGTOW, men going their own way, exists, and that's one of them. I counsel young men at this point to not marry. You can get involved with a woman, but don't marry. It opens you up to far too much financial and personal risk. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of the MGTOW things. There are some stuff that I do agree with that I don't talk about too terribly much because I have a pair of female adult children. But there is a reason it exists, and one of them is the law. So it would have been a lot simpler and more beneficial for this wife who hired a hitman to just divorce the husband and take him for everything. It was just dumb. You're talking about The Expanse, Drop of Truth. Let me put a pin in that. I do have a non-spoiler discussion that I'm going to do of The Expanse and Season 5. To some extent, I agree with you. Next bit of stupid was the shoulder-mounted surface-to-air missile. To begin with, it was a terrible special effect. Really bad, something that we've grown used to. I actually pulled out a clip of it. I'm not going to show it. The best way to describe it is the rocket. If you watched it in slow-mo like I did, because I was trying to find a good, frame to pull out, the missile actually disappears at one point so that it doesn't hit Ryan, and it explodes off the edge of the balcony. But it doesn't hit Batwoman or anyone else, and should therefore not explode just off of the balcony, but continue on across the street and blow it in the nearest building. And there's no blast impact. You know, when something like that happens, you get a big blast, right? No blast impact. The rocket exploded without leaving so much as a scratch from the force of the explosion. Victor, who's the bad guy in this episode, could have put some potted plants on the balcony, and they'd have just said, oh, cool, extra sunlight, you know, without being blown off the balcony. It was just dumb. Other things. Beyond that, the whole thing was kind of a stupid idea with respect to that surface air missile, because you're saying to me that a tenant of an apartment building can fire a missile out his balcony and nobody will notice. It's all like Wile E. Coyote logic. Ryan being late, almost late to her meeting with a parole officer. Okay, in real life, people do have meetings, even with parole officers, and they sometimes are late, and it's no big deal. 5 minutes, one way or the other, isn't going to cause a parole officer to flip out. You know, what time was her meeting? Was it when she was in the back alley, failing to beat up a crook? Like I say, you know, unless it's like something close to 9 to 5, which is what most government officials work, I just can't imagine anybody caring. Crypto 1701, no hair fires, nothing. It was nothing. It was just this bad special effect of, you know, an explosion in smoke. I'm reminded of some of the worse fan film special effects. Fan films. I've seen lots of, if you watch Star Trek Continues with your 1701, you probably are some kind of Star Trek fan. Star Trek Continues is a great show. It is continuing Star Trek, the original series, and it's in my own head canon in terms of being part of Star Trek, the original series. I am working on a novelization of the last 2 episodes to boldly go. I don't know if I'll ever finish it. If I do, it will be free because everything connected with that is free. But I'm working on a James Blish style novelization of it. Drop of Truth says, no, don't live with a woman today in a de facto relationship for greater than 2 years. She can take everything as if you were married. My neighbor knows a couple of serial de facto girls who live by this chicanery. Yeah, I hate getting into MGTOW stuff too much in depth because it might have personal consequences. I can just tell you that being married is a very bad idea for a man. Very, very bad. Until such time as women themselves stand up and say, no, these laws need to change. They'll never change. Because any politician that wants to go up and change the laws is going to go up against half of his electorate. No politician is going to say, let's make these laws more fair, because it will not be beneficial for half of his people who are going to vote for him. He'll be accused of, hating women and stuff like that. You can't do it. Women themselves have to come up and say, no, we need these laws to change. And I don't see that happening. So marrying a woman is a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. The de facto relationship, the thing about it is, here in the U.S., if you have children with a woman that you're not married to, you may very well wind up paying child support. And I have no problem with that. But you probably will keep your assets because those won't go away. Or it will be divided in a much more fair way because the law is not basically saying woman gets everything. When I was divorced, my attorney said to me that the best he could ever do for me was to tell me when not to fight something, because I was absolutely going to lose. Best advice I ever got, because I lost just about everything. I would have lost more if I had fought things. It's just bad. Texas is a community property state. You're saying, Crypto 1701, no alimony. I am of 2 minds about alimony. I think there's a case to be made that some women do, in fact, tend to get to the point where you're reliant on a husband for an income, but that's decreasing as time goes on. As women are almost consistently part of a workforce and can support themselves. Child support, a wholly other thing. If you make a child with somebody, As a man, I say, yeah, if I've got kids, I should be responsible for them financially. Absolutely. Same token, I would like to see the law say that a woman has to provide an invoice of where the money that you're giving her is going. There were places. I believe that my children could have gotten their bachelor's degree for free if my ex had not spent the money the way that she did. I won't go any more than that. Back to this stupid episode of Batwoman. There is, as always, the illegal, unlicensed, unsanitary secret clinic being operated by a second year, maybe third year this year, med student who is not licensed to practice medicine, and it now treats cancer patients? So the second year med student, not licensed to practice medicine, in the illegal, unlicensed, unsanitary secret clinic also has nurses on her staff. She even has a staff? And the illegal, unlicensed, unsanitary secret clinic being operated by a second year med student, not licensed to practice medicine, has a lab? Because they talk about sending some results to a lab? And the illegal, unlicensed, unsanitary secret clinic being operated by a second-year med student, not licensed to practice medicine, can do MRIs, CT scans, and blood work? Do you know how much that equipment costs? When was the last time? I think I went to a hospital the last time I had a CT scan. No, there was a specific place in town that does CT scans. They bought the equipment. My doctor referred me to them. It's ridiculous. And this unlicensed, illegal, unsanitary secret clinic being operated by a second-year med student, not licensed, to practice medicine, has regular patients who need an oncologist. This woman who's got cancer, it's turning into a regular hospital, and it's supposed to be something that's totally secret, and it just blows the mind. Crypto 17.1, ooh, sign me up. I'm not sure what you mean for which signing up you're meaning for that. So my state, or actually it's South Dakota that handled my divorce. And again, why are we pretending that Kate is going to come back? The air crash investigators found Kate's phone. Again, in a crash that should have damn near incinerated and destroyed that aircraft with no parts left. How are you getting a cell phone out of that? Especially one that didn't look damaged at all. It just sort of fell out of the sky onto a giant cushion of some kind. It's just ridiculous. Am I making this up about my own personal experience? No, I'm not making it up at all. Again, Kate is gone. Ruby Rose left, and I'm almost certain of this, because of the incompetent production staff that damn near got her killed doing her own stunts and actually managed to paralyze production assistant Amanda Smith through utter incompetence. And I always suggest to people, donate to the Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund. There's a link for it in my description box. I think it's scrolling past in my lower third. They got her paralyzed in a totally incompetent manner. And Ruby Rose doing her own stunts was either a result of the team doing, stupid things in terms of requiring her to do her own stunts, or it wasn't her being aggressive enough so that she was protecting herself. Say this a million times. Actors should not be doing their own stunts. Doesn't matter what it is. You really shouldn't be doing your own stunts. Actors spend their lives training about how to make effective performances. Stunt persons train their lives how to look like they're being badasses fighting or killing people or dying without hurting themselves. I am pretty sure, if I was Ruby Rose, I'd have been gone. I'd have just been gone. And if you're an actor, if they say, oh, we want you to do this stunt, say, no, you don't either. I need a stunt person. No, I'm not doing that stunt. I don't care if production shuts down until you hire one. I am not doing that stunt. That should be the answer, no matter how simple the stunt is. Aside from rolling on the ground, the answer should be, okay, we want you to do this, anything particularly physical. You say, no, I want a stunt person. Yeah, the insane plot, the lab, all of that. I'll get back to it some. I always have to stop and push the Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund because they paralyzed her through total incompetence. Short answer version of this is she was standing under, you know how they have those cranes where they put cameras into it and they'll bring the crane up or down so that they can get, shots that look like they're coming in from the sky or pulling back out. Very common thing to have. You see them, probably in your own city and stuff. You see them all the time when they're working on, high wires and stuff like that on poles. It's the exact same device. It's just that, on those they have a cage that people stand in. Well, you bring down what they did was they were bringing this down, and she was standing underneath it, and they whacked her on the head, crushed several vertebrae, and succeeded in paralyzing her. Well, that's freaking incompetence. All you do is the exact same thing that they do when they're working on those things on the street, which is you put up warning signs, around the area that's going to be working. Or in their case, you hire somebody to say, oh, get back, we're about to do this shot. Everybody stand away from this area. She should never have been there, and having her there at all was complete incompetence, just utter incompetence. Doing stunts unless you're Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise he's crazy. That man's insane. I would never do my own stunts. If you're an actor, just don't. That man's insane, and he's getting old enough now that if he keeps, he's slightly older than I am. If he keeps doing it, he's going to get himself killed. There's a great moment, having hit that age at 50. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, when Kirk is free climbing El Capitan, and I'm like, no. No, that's not happening. You get things like, minor arthritis in your lower back. You get things that are just general. It's hard to describe for somebody that's younger, but you get general aches and pains that no longer go away, and they can't really be treated. If my lower back arthritis gets bad enough, they can treat it with certain types of steroid injections and things like that. But so far, my doctor has declined to do it because it hasn't reached that bad. But you get to a point where you just can't do that stuff. My father, when that movie came out, my dad was about 50, and he said that here's how he thought this whole scene should have gone. And having reached that age myself, I agree. So you have Kirk, who is, was not the most svelte guy in the world at that time. Still looked good, but, he'd put on a little weight. You have him climb, you show the film where he's climbing up and just, scratching his way along, but you don't show it as being way up the mountain. You do, close shots of him climbing up the thing. And then he slips and he falls, and it's like 40 or 50 feet. And that's all. He hadn't gotten very far up there. Turns back to McCoy, who's coming to see if he's all right. Says, Bones, I don't think I'm as young as I think I am. I think that would have been a better way to play it. Drop Truth says, Brazil is sensible regarding alimony and property rights. Everything that a married person owns before they're married remains there. Well, yeah, that's good. It's like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Yeah. Anyway, Ruby Rose is not coming back to this show. Stop pretending that she might come back. Kate Kane was killed when that aircraft smashed into the ground at 500 miles per hour. It's just ridiculous. Couple of honorable mentions here in terms of the stupid. And again, I only really got to the first few scenes. That wife who's in the bathtub, she's got earbuds in her ears, which supposedly prevents her from hearing the guy she's having an affair with being murdered. It just struck me because I've never worn earbuds around water like that. Do people actually wear earbuds in the bathtub? I am a shower guy. I've never seen that done, so I don't know. Crypto 17.1 says there was a scene cut out from Wrath of Khan with Kirk skydiving from suborbital. Actually, it was cut out from Generations when he was doing a suborbital jump. That at least makes marginally more sense. I mean, Not sure you'd want to do that at his age, but when you get into things that are going to require the level of physicality that he showed when he was in his 30s, and it's 20 years later and he's in his 50s, and I'm that age. And even if I was in better shape, you get these aches and pains that just don't go away, and you're not able to do some of the things that you were doing when you were younger. It's just not possible. Anyway, at the crime scene, after the murder, Victor has ripped off his rubber gloves, his tie, his shirt, and then starts carving himself up while there at the crime scene. I think he's going to leave a lot of DNA evidence behind. I understand that he gets off on cutting himself, but did he need to look like he was having an orgasm in that teaser? It wasn't creepy exactly. It just left the viewer feeling, for me anyway, kind of embarrassed for the actor. Victor is running his hitman business from his cell phone. That doesn't usually how hitman business works. Got to wonder if he's advertising in Craigslist. There's a drug dealer in Alley who runs his business in an alley wearing a devil mask. Yeah, way to not look suspicious. Rachel Maddow's voice continues to grate on my nerves. In real life, she is a disgraced journalist. She, spent God I don't know how long trying to get Trump and failing miserably. Surely there must be some lesser-known gay radio host out there that you can tap for this. Somebody who is smaller but could benefit from, the exposure of being on the show. Surely there must be one. I don't know of one off the top of my head, but it's a big country. You can find somebody who could do that doesn't grate on half the viewers' nerves. Man, one has to wonder, why does Mary now own the holdup? Did Kate have a will or something? The new snakebite stuff that they've got is made from shrooms and Scarecrow's fear toxin. I can't imagine under what circumstances it would be a good idea to use Scarecrow's fear toxin for anything. I don't think crack whores would touch that stuff. That's where I stopped on the stupid. I just couldn't deal with it anymore because I was just writing down damn near the whole episode. It was just dumb. Last week they had some stupid, but it wasn't really horrible. This week it was just continuing back to stupid. So that's kind of my review. It was dumb. The writers for this thing need to be taken out back and giving a good whipping and then fired. The showrunner, same thing. As always, at the end of something you have to ask, is it any good? Well, again, my scale for this show is so low that it's next to Dinosaur Bones. 1 being existentially threateningly bad, which is you can die from watching it, and 5 being passable. Last week I got one with a 5. This one I give a 2 because you won't die from watching it, but it may make you sick. Your IQ will certainly drop by several points. It is terrible, terrible, terrible. I really dread what they're going to do. I mentioned last week how they're going to screw up my favorite character, Superman, with Superman and Lois next month. And yes, I guess this month, I will be reviewing that as well because as a Superman fan, as a small child, I cannot look away from that particular train wreck. I'm not looking forward to it at all. That's Batwoman. I still wouldn't watch it if I were you. This one was just insulting to your intelligence, and I could only get partway through before I finally just gave up and said, "I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to be showing the whole episode." Just no point. It tended to be dumb from beginning to end. There were some exciting parts, and I like the fact that Ryan is not practically perfect in every way. We should have seen this with Kate last season. She should be, you don't just hand somebody the bat suit and all the gadgets and they're perfect right off the bat. I think it's good she's doing that. That's probably one of the best things about it. And you got some exciting stuff out of it, no question. You got a retcon to give Alice some hand-to-hand fighting. I thought that was good. But mostly there was just a lot of stupid and bad special effects. And yeah, it's just awful as usual. So, one other thing real quick about cutscenes. Something that appeared just surfaced recently. He'll be Puerto Rican. I'm not sure who you're talking about, which person being Puerto Rican. There was something that came out, I guess it's been a few months, but there has always been, it first popped up for me in the novelization of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. In the scene in the travel pod when they're going from the orbital space station to the Enterprise, there is a conversation that occurs between some of the characters, and in the novelization, there was a mention that Sulu had just been promoted to captain, and he was going to take command of the Excelsior. Now, at that point, they didn't know what the Excelsior was going to be. It was just a ship name that they used. The Excelsior itself design didn't come along until later. Oh, TDG, hey, how's it going? You're talking about Superman being, okay, retracting messages. Well, no, it's using the same characters that we've seen in Supergirl. It's just that I have no, given that the other CW shows are nothing but just endless amounts of soap opera drama, I have really no faith that they're going to do a good job with it. I think it'll turn into soap opera drama. But we'll see. Who knows? Anyway, there was this scene that I first became aware of it when it appeared in the novelization. Now, the thing about novelizations is they don't necessarily get the shooting script to do a novelization from, because the novelization tends to be being written more or less at the same time that the movie is being shot. Drop truth, see you later. Keys to cut and a large size striker plate to acquire from my pain in the ass new security door. Okay, do catch me later on demand, depending on how long I'm running. Maybe you'll catch me later today. Yeah, they always recast roles oddly. Yes, that's true. Anyway, there's this scene where, because the novelist doesn't necessarily get a shooting script, they get a slightly earlier draft script, and then they sometimes make changes on set. Well, in this case, they made a change on set. George Takei has talked about this. He blames this on Shatner's performance. He says that they did have that continuing conversation where it's mentioned that Sulu is promoted to captain, going to be captain of the Excelsior, but Shatner refused to sell it, and it was therefore an unusable take. Well, fairly recently, and maybe I'll see if I can find it and link to it because it's on YouTube. Fairly recently, an audio of that scene continuation surfaced. You can actually hear them talking. It is a conversation between Kirk, Sulu, and McCoy. That was shot. That scene was in fact shot. Now, from the audio, you can't tell. It doesn't sound like Shatner's doing anything weird, but it could be that he didn't sell it. I don't know. But in any case, that scene's there. There is a scene that was shot that said Sulu was just promoted to captain and he was only going to the Enterprise because it comes in between, Kirk saying, it's right before Sulu says, no, it's right after. He says, well, I'm delighted. Any chance to go aboard the Enterprise. And then something about, Sulu, you've just been promoted to captain. Congratulations from McCoy and all that. And he says, yes, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So that scene was shot. It was shot. It just, didn't make the cut. And again, I'll see if I can't find it and link to it in my description box after I'm done. Wasn't planning to talk about it. It just came up. So, want to touch briefly on WandaVision. This will not be a spoiler. I have a viewer who I respect very much, who was in last week and left because I got into WandaVision. I didn't really spoil it. And I want to make clear that there is no spoiler here, and I understand why she left, because she's probably going to either be watching it or reacting to it because she's a reactor. So I want to be clear, this is spoiler-free. I do want to say that what happened with this show and what was confirmed this week is the curse of the secret master of fandom. I knew exactly where this was going. I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen next. I've watched reactors reacting to this most recent episode 5 of the series, and it's going exactly where I thought. There's nothing new, nothing original, and at worst you tend to figure it out about a half an hour too early. In my case, I figured it out in episode 1. You know, most people said, what are they doing here with this stuff? It doesn't make sense. Because they don't have the life experience to know what was being referenced. I do. I wasn't around in the 1950s, but I've seen things of that era, so I knew what they were referencing. I was born in the 1960s. I don't have much memory of some of what was going on then, but I've seen it after the fact. So, you know, I knew what they're referencing here. I was a child of the 1970s, so I know what they're referencing there. It's going exactly the way I thought it would. Exactly the plot twist here. It's nice to see some of the actors, the characters that we're seeing. It's nice to see that organization. It's nice to see what happens at the very beginning, you know, once you clued into, oh my God, that's what happened. But nothing here, aside from seeing these characters in this episode and some of the backstory about what happened, aside from that, it's going totally the way I expected. It's the curse of the secret master of Adam. You see it all coming. The best you can do is admire the execution. Nothing that's happened plot-wise has surprised me in the slightest. And I've watched a lot of reactors who were very surprised, but they're millennials, post-millennials. So they have not got the life experience to see with it. They've not watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. Hey, Jeanette, how's life treating you? Going well for me. I hope it's going well for you as well. Crypto1701 says it's Disney. I don't put, you know, it's an MCU thing. They're also setting something up in this series that's going to come back later in films, I think, because we haven't seen much of it before now. But I think what they've decided to do is start concentrating on television rather than trying to build up to this gigantic big bad, or at least give some time maybe for the viewers to age out of, you know, seeing Infinity War and Endgame. You know, I mean, there are reactors on YouTube that are generally post-millennials who have not seen the MCU movies, including those last two. Blows my mind, but then I'm the age that I am. And I've watched these things in the movie theaters until they got too ridiculously expensive. But they react to this stuff. They haven't seen it before. Again, blows my mind. But I've seen them reacting to this series, and they're confused, and then they're like, oh, okay, wow, that's amazing. Me, I'm just kind of like, oh, here's what they're doing. Here's what they're doing. Ah, okay, I was right in this episode. That background is of the new Brady house, isn't it? It's not the Brady house. It's very, very similar to the Brady house. I always try to get my backgrounds as close to 4K as humanly possible. I'm going in 1080p. I have plans eventually to upgrade that. But the cameras are way too expensive. But I'd like to have a 4K camera. Everything that you see around me, the lower third, everything, is actually rendered. When I create the images and stuff, everything is actually rendered in 4K. That's because I want to have it ready for when, if, you know, YouTube requires me to kind of go to 4K because everybody else is. But like I say, right now the 4K webcams are so expensive, like $300 or something. It hasn't gone down since I first looked at them. But I got one on Amazon wish list. If you go to my support page, that'll be sylranch.tv/donate. You can get to that list for parts and things that I would like to have for the show. If you feel like you want to blow 300 or so bucks, feel free to get me that 4K webcam. The one that they built in the actual exterior. No, as I say, this is actually a house someplace. It's very, very similar to the Brady house, but it's not. It's somebody actually built this. They thought it would be cool to have an interior like the Brady house, so they actually built it. Because when I was going to look, as I mentioned, I try to get things as close to 4K as possible. When I was going to look for an image of that, I was searched for Brady house, but God, the resolution is so terrible it would look bad in 1080p. But I found one that was a lookalike that somebody had done. Interesting thing too, just in terms of the backgrounds, because I always like to try to find backgrounds that are relevant to the show when I'm reviewing. This one here, if anybody's been around very long, you may recognize this as the interior of the 1966 Batcave. A little darker, but it's still the interior of it. This is actually a plastic model. That blew my mind because I was looking for a high, res version of that and couldn't find one. But this is a plastic model. It's that somebody shot a picture of in higher than 4K. It's really detailed. Let's see if I go this direction. You can see all of this stuff. I inserted the jackalope, of course, but all of this stuff is a plastic model. And it was so detailed that I said, "Oh, screw this! I'm going to use that." So, but WandaVision is a good show. I certainly suggest you watch it. If you're confused by the first couple of episodes, go back in TV history, and you'll see what's being referenced there. It's not just them being weird and goofy. It comes together. Crypto1701 says the Property Brothers actually did an interior. Oh, you could tell because of the 3 steps going up the landing. Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what this is, because there's a landing up there behind my chat. So maybe that is. Maybe that's what they built it. To be honest, what I did was I was searching for Brady House set and found one that was I couldn't attribute to anything. So maybe that's what this is. Again, WandaVision, good show. Suggest you watch it. If you don't have Disney Plus, as I don't, maybe you have friends that have Disney Plus. A good friend is the search engine DuckDuckGo.com, because I've stopped doing anything in terms of torrenting, except like Batwoman. I wanted to get a high-def pic that I was maybe going to use for a review on Monday or Tuesday that I finally just gave up on. But if you go to DuckDuckGo.com, and you should never do what I'm about to suggest because it's wrong. I just want to mention that, if you're somebody who is interested in your intellectual property and you're worried about some level of piracy, one of the ways that you can discover whether or not your IP is being pirated is by putting the following search engines into search terms into DuckDuckGo.com. And again, I was in IT for 40 years, and I was in IT security. This is purely for the benefit of my colleagues who are dealing with intellectual properties, and they want to find out where and if they are being pirated. My colleagues, you might enter the search terms, watch, space, quote, whatever it is that you want to watch, end quote, online, free. Make sure you have good ad blockers, my colleagues, lots of good ad blockers, and you may have to click around a little bit. But you'll probably find that your intellectual property is, in fact, being pirated in a number of different places. And so, my colleagues, you should know this so that you know how to protect yourselves from it. This is something for my colleagues because, again, doing that for, watching, that would be wrong. This is something that you don't do. Absolutely. Don't go to DuckDuckGo.com. Unless you're an IT professional wanting to find out where and if your IP is being pirated, and type in, if you're a professional, watch, space, quotes, whatever you want to watch, space, online, space, free, with lots of ad blockers, which my colleagues know they should have. Crypto171's news you didn't need. Actually, I'm curious. I'm always curious about the stuff that I find. because sometimes it's not anywhere attributed. And, I could tell from looking at it that this was not, CGI. Sometimes I get CGI stuff, but this was not CGI. So I thought that was very cool. So the other thing I can talk about tonight, it is now about 10:38, so it's about a little more than an hour and a half. I can talk about The Expanse. And again, this is not going to be a spoiler discussion, but I can talk about The Expanse. The Expanse is one of those shows that really tickles me as a scientist because I was in IT. I started out in IT at a time when IT, information technology, was not a thing. It didn't exist. My degree is in computer science, and we did, I am not going to say that I'm responsible for everything in the universe when it comes to IT. Everyone in my generation stood on the shoulders of giants to do what we did. But I am responsible for a bunch of internet in Chicagoland and as far west as western South Dakota. And I don't just mean running cables. There was a lot of things that I did to build the modern internet that you use. Again, not the only guy, and stood on the shoulders of giants to do it. But as a guy who was on a daily basis, doing science and, all of that, Crypto 1701, you should never use a VPN when not downloading a torrent, which you don't want to do. Yeah, I like VPNs in any case. I'm a big believer in VPNs. I've got a live stream that I did about alternative social media, alternative applications. Big believer in VPNs for a number of reasons. And I certainly suggest you use Proton VPN. I'm a committed Proton Mail user, and it's where all of my domains go to because it is highly secure. And they have a VPN, and I think that's very good as well. So, Proton VPN is one to look at. But yes, having VPNs for a number of different purposes is a good idea. If my colleagues in IT security want to check things out in a way that's a little more surreptitious, which security people often do. We tend to be very paranoid for good reason. Having a VPN is a real good way to do that. You can also check whether your British IP is being pirated by having a VPN and having an exit point that's a British IP address. So, Crypto 1701, the effects are awesome this year. It's awesome all the way around. This is a show, again, that as a scientist tickles me because they have gone to, in general, a lot of effort to make the science make sense. The orientation of the ships is where it should be when they're under power because, a lot of times ships like this where they'll generally give it artificial gravity. They say, no, that doesn't exist in this world. And they'll orient the decks so that you have your engine here, but the decks are oriented this way. That doesn't make any sense. When you're under acceleration, you want to have your decks oriented in the same direction as your thrust so that when it pushes, you get something that approaches a gravity type situation. You're getting an acceleration. People's butts are going this direction because they're being pushed this way. They do stuff like that. When they're weightless, they have magnetic boots so that they can walk around. Or they're just weightless. And they execute this really well. This first, all of the seasons on this have been engaging in many different ways. This season, I think, and Drop of Truth has referenced it, seems a little slow. Previous seasons have been a little more faster paced. The last 2 or so episodes of this season have gotten back to a little bit of a faster pace. That's good. I like that. Some of it was a little slow paced. I didn't mind some of the relationship building that went on that was maybe a little unexpected. The one that was unexpected that came up at the end of this last episode with Rasanati, I thought was kind of fun, given the characters involved. I like the cliffhanger that it ended on, because that indicates they're going to have a huge problem next season. Generally, as I say, I like all this stuff. I like what they did in terms of having, I can spoil a little bit of it, having a war this season and how that was executed with, asteroids and stuff like that. Good. I like generally all the character development. The president, or the Secretary General of the UN, who I don't remember her name, she started out this show being a complete a-hole and has now turned into somebody that certainly is capable of being very clinical about, doing nasty things if she has to, but will fight not to do things that are not necessary to be nasty. So that character growth is good. Effects were good except Chrissy's old ship. Well, I mean, nothing's ever going to be perfect. You don't have infinite money to spend on something. But what's gone on, regardless, all 5 seasons has been quite excellent. It's a show that largely defies reviewing very much. You'll get more out of it if you watch reactors and what they say afterwards. I know there's some people who hate reactors. They're a giant guilty pleasure of mine. They get to be bigger and bigger all the time because there are more and more millennials and post-millennials who have never seen films that were classics when I grew up. Or, God, I keep hoping that some of them will go back to like the 50s or the 60s. I would love to see a reactor do, if you're a reactor, please, if you haven't seen it, do it. I'd love to see a reactor do Forbidden Planet, because that's a classic film from that era. And not just science fiction, there's other stuff. But there's so many reactors now who have never seen any of the Star Wars original trilogy. Just never seen it. And when they do, they generally are like, wow, okay, I get why this is, okay, this kicked off an entire giant universe and franchise. I totally get why. These are great movies. These are fun. They almost all do that. And it's a kick for me to watch it, to see if they're getting the same thing out of it that I did when I was 12, because that's when I first saw, the original Star Wars movie in 1977. So they're a giant guilty pleasure of mine. But the thing about The Expanse is it rather defies a certain level of review, because it's generally a season-long arc that tends to end in a way that you can go, oh my God, it's going to be something big coming up next season. So aside from saying the acting's very good, and I get a kick out of the fact that the Belters have their own dialect. I'm a huge fan of dialects, as some of my regular viewers know. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor, and I was not a good actor, but the only thing that I did that anybody agreed with me that I was good at was dialects. So I get a kick out of that dialect. I can't do it right off the top of my head this second, but sometimes after I've been watching this, I go, oh yeah, I can do this dialect and I can talk like that. I love that. I love that they've gone to that level of detail. Crypto 1701 says 1G the whole way, half the way forward, half the way backwards. Yes, exactly. You're accelerating this way. You got your decks lined up against the acceleration, so people's butts are in the seats when they're going this way. And then halfway through the trip, you flip it around and you do a deceleration, but then that's going to cause I forgot what you call it, but it's going to cause the deceleration is going to cause the decks to be this direction. The fact that it's pushing, and people's butts are going to be in the seats that way. And they do that on this show reliably every single time. It's great that way. They're not taking many shortcuts with the science. They've got some science that's kind of super science, but it comes from outside sources. It's not coming from what we have created as the human civilization. It's very, very good that way. Chrissy's old ship, UN-1, is the only one that is oriented wrong. Yeah. There's stuff that they have to be doing a little more carefully in that respect. But most of the time, almost all the time, you're seeing stuff that is so scientifically accurate that somebody like me, who has been a science fiction fan since forever, I can look at it and go, oh, wow, that's actually accurate. That's what would actually happen. And episodes in this, the time on them, sometimes there can be a long period of time between episodes that passes because you have to take time. It just isn't an instantaneous thing, to get from the asteroid belt or Ceres, to Earth and the moon. It takes time. Or if you're going to go, particularly when the series starts out and they're often like Saturn's rings, that is way out there. It takes a lot of time to get back. I've forgotten what it is, but every planet in the solar system, as you move out, is like double the distance away from the planet that came before it. So you get all the way out to Saturn. My God, that's going to be a long time coming back. So there's time sometimes that happens between these because it requires time in order to get there and come back. So it's very, very scientifically accurate. Tickles that part of my brain. Some people who are not used to that will find it kind of slow-paced. But and compared to action schlock, it is slow-paced. Compared to a lot of science fiction where they cut corners, they just say, oh God, we're never going to be able to show weightlessness. This civilization has artificial gravity. The problem with it is when you do that, and it's the case with Star Trek, if you can have artificial gravity, you have just solved the problem of inertia and things like that. Your ships, the gravity, you should be able to make a gravity drive. That's going to change everything in the universe. If we had a gravity drive, getting around the solar system would be very, very fast. So what they've done is they've said, no, we don't control gravity. We have to have this. So it's very cool. Depiction of fusion last season was awesome. Yes. There's not anything for the most part. There occasionally is a mistake or two. But again, as somebody who's watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction, and having watched this stuff and knowing about science as I do, and having astronomy and that level of science something as a bit of a lifelong hobby, I look at it and I go, wow, this is really scientifically accurate. It's as accurate as you can probably get, and without infinite money, to do it right. It's why I worry that they're going to, because they've talked about it for Amazon, doing a mini-series or something like that of Ringworld by Larry Niven. If you've not read this novel, go read it right now. I'll actually link to it when I'm done so you can go to Amazon and find it. Read Ringworld. It is an amazing novel about amazing structure. I don't know that it's filmable. And if it is, I'm not sure that they wouldn't inject so much SJW into it that it wouldn't be annoying. There are some things I don't think you should touch, and I think Ringworld may be it. Technologically, can we do it? Yeah, I think we're at a point where technologically with CGI and stuff, we could, do it. But narratively, I don't think they should touch it. I think you'd end up cutting out so many things that are really important. That novel takes place in a shared universe of many novels now and many, many short stories that Larry Niven created, and there's so much backstory in there that not being able to have that backstory, it's like Dune. It's not as complex as Dune, frankly, but it's like Dune, where you have all this backstory, and how do you translate that into a couple of hours? And I don't think you can. But anyway, Expanse, spoiler-free. Yeah, really, really, really good show. Really worth watching. You need to have a decent attention span and be aware that, this is a future where the things that we see as common tropes in science fiction have not come to pass. No artificial gravity, no faster than light travel, none of that. And its timeline is better. Everybody thinks when you listen to the idiot things that are said about going to Mars and creating a colony there real soon now are nonsensical. If you know the science, it turns into nonsense very quickly. And this is several hundred years in the future, and it's taken that long to get all this going. That's actually more accurate. If you look at the history of exploration and colonization on Earth, it has taken hundreds of years to get where we are today. So when you're taking hundreds of years to get where they are there, I'm down with that. All of that's not going to happen instantly. We're not just going to go out to the asteroid belt instantly. We're not just going to colonize Mars instantly. We're not going to have moon bases instantly. All of that stuff is going to take a lot more time than people think about because of the science involved there. Depiction of fusion. Let's see, do Crypto 1701 at 1G, you'll hit the speed of light in 1 year. Yes, except that you run into the problem of relativity. You can't really get close to or hit the speed of light. It ultimately requires an infinite amount of energy. You need the entire universe to do it. So you can't really get there. It's an exponential curve in terms of what it requires scientifically to get up there, and you're just not going to hit there. No matter how, you can go at 1G, but you're requiring after that a certain point, you'll never hit it because of relativity. Ringworld, Cryptine 71, awesome book. They made a video game in the 90s. Yes, I know they did. Kind of a spin-off, semi-related video game. I never played it. Probably could these days find it and play it with ease. It would just be so low resolution on today's computers. I might check that out and find it because I never did play it. But yeah, Ringworld is an awesome book by itself. One of the cool things, and again, this is being a secret master of fandom, knowing this. Ringworld, I don't want to spoil it too much, but Ringworld has an instability in it that when he wrote the first book, Larry Niven didn't know about. Because again, this back then, this was the early 1970s. Computers filled a warehouse and they did not have the computing power of your freaking phone. This phone has more computing power than what it took to put man on the moon, considerably more, orders of magnitude more. And their computers fit in a warehouse back then. So he couldn't just calculate this stuff out. It had to be calculated out by hand if you were going to do it at all. And he did do that a lot. But there was an instability in the Ringworld that he did not see. And at WorldCon, the World Science Fiction Convention, which was what conventions were back then, and we still have WorldCon today. At WorldCon, which was the big science fiction convention, the next year after he wrote this, MIT students who had done the math showed up at WorldCon and had a banner that read, "The Ringworld is unstable." And that instability is what he used as a jumping off point for the next book. And there have been several done after that. For my money, generally speaking, the first one is the best one. But the fact that he was like, okay, fine, I'll use that as jumping off for a sequel. And there have been several other ones after that. It fits into his entire what's called a known space universe, and it's an enormous universe. Not only has he written in it, but also other people have written in it at certain parts of the timeline. It is very well fleshed out. It's very consistent. There are different phases in history that they tend to focus on, starting from about the 1970s up to about, I think the latest one is 39th century or something like that, the farthest one out. The 1971 you have to be aware of, I guess later than 1970, but it was depicting a possible future that never came to pass. So you have to watch that. That is the common thing about science fiction. It's about the only thing that all science fiction has in common is they always get the technology wrong. There is no science fiction that ever gets it right. You look back at Star Trek, the original series, well, those guys were thinking about what could happen in the future. They thought there was going to be a giant increase in power. And what we actually got was a massive increase in information technology. So their computers are run by buttons and switches and knobs because at that time they could not foresee the computerization that we have, the information technology. When you look, if you like, and I don't, Star Trek Discovery and the advanced IT that it has there, 10 years from now, it's going to look dated because they will have gotten it wrong. There is no science fiction ever that got the technology right. Sometimes they predicted bits and pieces, but in general, you look at all of it and you say, oh, okay, well, it was a good try. But they never quite got it right. And the same thing is true with the known space universe. They did not get that early part close to where we live right now right. But it's still pretty cool to read. It's still got some very interesting stuff in it. See you later, Crypto 1701. TDG rather, nice to see you here tonight. Don't remember if I caught you before. Is there anything filmed today that doesn't have SJW drivel injected into it? I don't think so. It's annoying to me every time I see it, and I'm not sure that there isn't anything that doesn't do that. It's because the people in Hollywood who are making our entertainment, whether it's television, movies, music, whatever, they are all extremely on the liberal to socialist side. Don't get me wrong. I had a conversation with a kid on Twitter, and I don't remember what triggered it, but I was mentioning that, as I said earlier, libertarians have now been targeted specifically by government for, I don't know what, something horrible. And he said, oh, you're just a cisgendered old white male. And he hadn't seen anything of me. He didn't look at my channel. And my Twitter account is completely nondescript about it. It shows a jackalope. It doesn't show my face and so I said, go watch my videos and you tell me. You apparently have not been paying attention to current events. And he said, oh, well, you've never really been oppressed. And I'm like, dude, you're throwing me in as an enemy. In the 1980s, here in Lincoln, Nebraska, it was legal to discriminate against gay people when it came to jobs, when it came to housing. If somebody was gay, you could turn them away from all of this. I engaged in activism in the 1980s to get that stopped. So if you're going to throw me in and say, oh, you're an old white cisgendered male, buddy, I want you to know that I was working on this crap before you were born. It's tried to say it, but I have, over the course of my lifetime, had plenty of gay friends. Still do. I don't think it's outing this person, but there's somebody I know who watches my show or has watched it that I believe is gay. I don't know for sure about that. I've read some of what this person has written, and I believe that's implied. But I have no problem with that. I was fighting for those rights before these kids were friggin' born. So I don't have any problem with stuff like that. I really don't. And, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor. You can't be an actor, really, without being, exposed to a fair number of gay people. And people of color, for me, never been an issue. Anywhere that I've seen that, I try to fight against any racism and all of that. So when you're lumping me in, with horrible people, you just keep in mind, I've been at this since before you were born. So I don't have any problem, with stuff like, showing equality when it's true equality. But what they do is not true equality. If you want to have, I'm in favor of doing stuff like, if I have a new TV series, maybe I want to have something where I have a relationship, right? And I need, because of the way the relationship works, I need a male and a female. Okay. But maybe there's other roles where you could be totally nondescript about it. Audition men and women for the same role. Audition homosexuals. Audition people of color. All of that. I have no problem with that, as long as it's really not an issue. The TV series I Spy, which was in the 1960s, that was about a pair of CIA agents, one of whom was black, one of whom was white. They never mentioned it. They made a statement by not making a statement. They had these two people as partners. One of them was played by Bill Cosby back when it was okay. He was a very young man. But one of them was black, one was white, and they never said anything about it. As far as they were concerned, they were just equals. And that's the way to make a real statement, is to not make a statement. It's like on Star Trek, the original series. You had all these people of different races and national backgrounds that were, at the time, pretty antagonists toward each other. But they were living and working together, and the way that you made a statement about it was not talking about it. I got nothing problem with that. But when you do all this SJW nonsense where you're just ticking boxes and you're just, calling attention to it. And, it's like Ruby Rose last season of Batwoman is just a perfect example, Oh, she's a lesbian. Make sure she's screwing everybody. She's a lesbian. Remember that. Lesbian, screwing everybody. Make sure she screws everybody so that they get that she's a lesbian, And it didn't make sense unless she's a complete slut. That choice makes no sense. But because of the fact that they're having to do this SJW nonsense, you get that. And you see it in Star Trek Discovery. I'm going to go out and piss off some people. I am not transphobic, but I have to tell you that a fair amount of people who identify as trans in some way, I think have what they used to call gender dysphoria. And if they were not encouraged to do this stuff, they probably would wind up a lot more psychologically well, a lot happier. Because people used to say, oh, it's because they're not accepted in society and they feel awful and they're suicidal and all that stuff. Well, my generation and beyond, we just don't give a crap anymore. We just don't care. And if you can't really say that about us, I don't think. I'm not gay or something, so I can't talk to anybody's life experience. But I mean, you look at certain people like actors who are not giving their kid a gender. They're going to wait till the kid's 5 years old to choose its own gender. That's stupid. That will screw up your kid psychologically. And I think there's some of that going on, where if it's constantly said, oh, this is good, we want you to be able to do, go ahead and do it. Whereas if you weren't doing that, pushing it, maybe you'd have somebody who was a little more psychologically okay, because the number of suicides doesn't seem to matter. You can get into these certain types of bajillion different genders and you still get a suicide rate. It sounds to me like maybe that's not the problem. Maybe there's some issue going on there psychologically that needs to be looked at. So Twitter, come get me for having that opinion, but that's where I'm at with that. And those of you who want to come after me for being a white cisgendered male, old white cisgendered male, screw you. I was working for equal rights before you were born. And I don't care if you say I'm an old white cisgendered male, because guess what? I was doing this before you were born. And if you're gay or something and you live in a place where you're being discriminated against, I say to you, vote with your feet. This is a huge country. If you're living in a place that's bad, if you can get up and leave, do it. It's a huge country. There's lots of places. If you're gay or black or Hispanic, or particularly if you're Asian, come to the Upper Great Plains. We had an enormous influx of Vietnamese after the Vietnam War. Come to the Upper Great Plains, because nobody cares. We just don't care. If you don't want to be discriminated against and you're in a place that does, vote with your feet and get out. Okay. Well, I tell you, it's been a little over 2 hours. I have noticed sometimes that having a slightly shorter than 3 hour stream is something that people will watch after the fact. It seems like it's a little more approachable than when they see a 3 hour one. So I will probably just drop it off here. I guess that's all that I have to say about that. So I would love to keep this conversation going. So please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to get back to you. So thanks for watching. That's all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.